So today, as I've always said, it's always good to look at other countries and how they look at us through the eyes of Brexit. And today, we're looking at the times of India. Because I've said it multiple times, one thing that a lot of these Brexiteers want is to re-establish the alignment that we used to have back when we had an empire, or back when the empire was fading out. Now, a couple of days ago, I did about about how the bad boys of Brexit are going to New Zealand to cause a lot of mischief, and a lot of people from New Zealand, thank you for commenting on that, because I don't know anything about New Zealand politics or what's going on. It's not something I follow, but it was fascinating to see a lot of people basically saying, "Oh yeah, we remember what happened when the UK joined the EU. It left New Zealand, probably Australia as well, quite high and dry. But now they've realigned themselves. They've sorted them out. They do not need us, and yet we're going to them as if they're going to welcome us back with open arms. They've got new trading partners. They've got new friendships and alliances that are going on that, quite frankly, they just don't care about. Ask any economist which area, if you could be a country, like a new country just dropped onto planet Earth, where they would want to be, and they will tell you it's the Pacific. And Australia and New Zealand are in the perfect position to take advantage of how much the Pacific trade area network is going to grow. We are an island. We aren't going to just suddenly up anchor and just sail round into the Pacific. But that's a lot of Brexiteers seem to think and talking about. And we've talked about Empire 2.0 quite a bit. Empire 2.0, as far as I can definitely see coming to fruition, is going to be not actual physical imperial colonial control, but actually economic imperial control. Because if you put someone who's, say, a favourable ear to New Zealand, and he gets into the position of Prime Minister, well, why am I going to help out all these other countries that we're really friends with? No, I want to turn to the UK, who's our glorious mother country, and start giving them more favourable trade deals. That is where it becomes deadly. And that's where other countries should absolutely resist people like banks and so forth coming in to try and interfere in your elections. So, this, as I said, comes from the Times of India. And again, it's fantastic because we've covered this before. They've said how much they want to do a trade deal with India. And India just turned around and just said, we will not be your imperial bazaar. And good on India for doing that. So, obviously this comes from them. The title of the article is Karma Calling. Country that used divide and rule split over Brexit. With Britain now certain to become with Brexit now certain to become a reality, the UK as we know it is sure to undergo significant transformations. On the political front, the recent British elections exemplified a clear split in British society. Although the pro-Brexit Conservative Party of Boris Johnson won the day, the anti-Brexit camp remains considerable but divided. Take, for example, of Scotland, where the anti-Brexit Scottish Nationalist Party won by a landslide. This potentially sets them up for another Scottish referendum. Then, while Johnson has negotiated a new Brexit arrangement for Northern Ireland, the effectiveness of the plan to prevent a hard border between British territory and the Republic of Ireland is yet to be tested. What all this means is that psychologically, the UK is no longer one entity. Brexit has fundamentally challenged Britain's projection of itself in the world. The UK can no longer claim to be a champion of liberal values, as Brexit was primarily driven by a desire to keep out foreigners and take back control of immigration and the UK's borders. Where once Great Britain saw itself as a modernising force for the world, a perception that also underpinned British colonialism in past centuries, today it stands divided as a divided nation where parochial forces have gained the upper hand. Which brings into question the credibility of British soft power. For the last 200 years, English was seen as the language of progress. It was the lingua franca of science, political theory, diplomacy, and finance, onto the window of progressive ideas such as equality for justice, democracy, and human rights. But in the light of Brexit, all of that is coming apart. According to the American political scientist Joseph Nye, who coined the term soft power in the late 1980s, a country's cultural, ideological, and infrastructural attractiveness could help it shape the world. Until recently, Britain had deployed all these soft assets brilliantly. But with Brexit, all of this risks boomeranging on the UK. For as soon as the British openness started being seen as a liability by a considerable section of the British population, given a slowing economy and changing British demographics, racism and nativism reared their ugly heads. Fears began rising that the white British population would soon be overwhelmed by people of colour and outsiders. It was these regressive forces that are driving Britain today and undermining its position as a cultural powerhouse. Perhaps it is all karma. After all, Britain for centuries had divided people on the basis of ethnicity, religion, and sex to profit from it. It drew arbitrary lines in the sand and sowed seeds of generation-long communal strife. We in the subcontinent are well aware of how deep the scars of Britain's divide and rule policy inflict upon us. Today, it is Britain's turn to be divided on an ideological and possibly sectarian and ethnic grounds. And with British openness, fairness and multiculturalism now undermined by Brexit, the pull of the UK as a destination for talent is also likely to fade. British politicians may think that they can manage the situation and maintain British soft power supremacy, but that would be complete arrogance. The same arrogance that saw certain British politicians boost regressive forces by proposing Brexit for political gains. Soft power was really the UK's biggest asset, since it was overshadowed by the military power of the US in the earlier half of the 20th century. And with the global axis of power shifting from the west to the east, the decline in British soft power is bound to hurt the UK even more. In that sense, Britain risks becoming an old, stoic nation with little real actual influence on the world, and many would say it serves them right. Can't really disagree with them on that. But we've talked about this many times before. And it's always so funny to see people going, "What? We don't want to reset up the British Empire. Don't be silly. Don't be daft." And to those people, I can only say this: generally look at what Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and all these other people have been saying. That article is spot on. Brexit was driven in a large part by racism. You can say that, there was no racism as part of the Leave campaign. All I've got to say is, just look at the unofficial Leave campaign. There was a reason why Nigel Farage wasn't selected as the guy to front the official Leave campaign. They were fearful that he would turn it into a race thing. And given his unofficial campaign, I can absolutely see that they were right to fear that. And now, we are going to suffer from it. And he actually picked up something that I don't think we've discussed before, which I think we should discuss, that Britain as a destination for talent. Some of our best people in this country were foreigners. And we haven't celebrated that for years. In fact, we've never celebrated that. But today, we have essentially pulled up that drawbridge, and we are not going to be seen as a desirable destination for these potentially talented people to come and live. And they are right. The axis of power is shifting from the west back to the east. You can't deny that. And we alone, as a power, as nothing, we are nothing now that we've left Europe. But again, that's just part of the consequences of Brexit. Part of the consequences that we're warned about, that we told you about. And we just said, oh no, that's just Project Fear. I've always, and I've continued starting to say this now, all we have to do is let Brexit happen. Because while Brexit was going to happen, and the Brexiteers could at least shy off any actual qualms and just brush away any criticism, come January next year, there's no hiding. The car crash will be complete. And as I've said in a couple of comments recently to people, Euroscepticism, as British Euroscepticism, dies on the 1st of January 2021.